This is Dorie Clark, and I am so pleased to be here for our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. This week's guest is Muriel Wilkins. She is going to be talking with us about getting unstuck as a leader. Muriel is a wonderful person. She's the co-author of the book Own the Room, and she is also the host of the popular podcast, Coaching Real Leaders. Muriel, so glad to have you here.
So happy to be here, Dorie. I don't get excited about a lot of things, but I'm excited about this conversation because any chance to talk with you is a star in my day.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, it's great to have the opportunity. And so, Muriel, we also have live guests here. So I want to say for anybody who's tuning in live, please feel free to type into the comment box. Let us know who you are and where you're calling in from. And we will be taking your questions from Muriel as well. So Muriel, the first thing that I'm really curious about, so with your podcast, it's now going to be entering soon, its second season, Coaching Real Leaders. Yep. This is actually a very interesting and kind of innovative thing. Executive coaching is something that usually happens behind closed doors. This is a very private, personal type thing. You are coaching actual leaders, actual people, and listeners can tune in and listen behind the scenes. How did you come up with this idea, and what have you learned in the process of doing it this way?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So you want to know the real story of how I came up with
Yes, I do.
idea? Okay. So I was, I have kids who I shared with you, they're 14, but this was probably, I think at the time they were 12. And I constantly, when I'm coaching my real clients via Zoom or having to tell them to be quiet because they make a lot of noise. And one day after I had a Zoom call with one of my clients, my son walked in and he said, "Mommy, do you ever record your sessions and then upload them up into YouTube so other people can see them?" And I said, "No, why would I do that?" And he goes, "Because then everybody else could learn from what you're doing." And I thought, oh my God, that's a fantastic idea. And that paralleled with the fact that I'm a huge fan of Esther Perel's podcast, which is just life-changing and transformative. And then with the other piece being, I had really been in this place of trying to figure out how to make coaching more accessible because it's such a, in my view, a bit of a luxury item. And there are so many people who want coaching and want the benefits of coaching, but clearly don't have access to it, right? In the way that many of my clients have and your clients have. So all those things sort of converged at once. And then I ended up having a lovely conversation with our friends at HBR and there we went. And that's really how it all came about, from this my very nosy kid being interested somewhat in what I was doing and making it an idea of putting it on YouTube, which is not what we did, but close enough to it. That's how it all began.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. And it definitely shows that great ideas can come from all sources.
Exactly.
Super cool. So we're here with Muriel Wilkins. She is the host of the podcast, Coaching Real Leaders, and she is also the author of the book, Own the Room. And I'm curious, Muriel, in Own the Room, you really focus in on how leaders can find their unique voice. And I know from talking to my clients that is something that a lot of people struggle with. Like, what does that even mean? How do you go about finding what your voice is as a leader? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you guide people?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting that you said, what do people even mean? Because that's how we even embarked on the journey of figuring out what does it mean to have leadership presence? What does it mean to have a voice? My business partner and I, Amy Sue, when we first started coaching individuals, this is something that would come up time and time again. This person needs to work on having their leadership voice. That person needs to work on enhancing their presence. But then when we would ask the very people who would giving that feedback, well, what do you mean by that? They were like, I don't know, right? Which is like the worst feedback you can give to somebody. Build your leadership presence, but I have no idea what it is. So that's when we set out on this quest to try to figure out, really in the service of our clients, what does it mean to have a leadership voice? And what we boiled it down to is really two things, right? One is the ability to be able to demonstrate your value in an authentic way. And that's an ability to really be able to then articulate your voice. What is it that you bring to the table? What's your point of view? What's the vision even that you have on a larger scale for your organization? So that's one piece of it. And then the other piece of it was your ability to give voice to others and your ability to connect and be relatable and understand what others are also going through so that you can give them a voice in whatever context that you're in. So that truly having a signature voice is being able to do both of those things in parallel, and do it in your own authentic way. And so that's really what we work with our clients in terms of helping them define what their voice is using both of those muscles.
That's fantastic. I love that, Muriel. Thank you very much. And we'd just like to say a big hello to the people who are tuning in and joining us. I am seeing actually that there may be an issue with the comments loading. So if you have written in, please try again, because I want to see from you. I know you're all out there because I can see our viewership numbers. But please retype your name and where you're dialing in from in the comments, because I want to say hi. Unfortunately, it's not loading, but we want to get your comments and your questions for Muriel Wilkins. So we're very excited about that. Now, Muriel, one of the things that has been facing a lot of people lately is, of course, the transition to remote work that we have had over the past year, the abrupt transition to remote work. That is something that has been really challenging for a lot of leaders. And I'm curious, as someone who is an executive coach working inside these organizations, what have you seen, and how has leadership needed to change? What are your clients coming to you and talking about with regard to the transition to remote work, and now this kind of weird half in, half out hybrid workplace?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Dorie. I have found that with my clients, particularly early on, it was a lot of the work was kind of around sort of bringing them off the ledge of how different things were, right? Because they sort of went from 0 to 100 in terms of assessing that it was a completely different world, right? And so because they felt like it was a completely different world, they felt like they had to do things completely differently than what they did previously. And they had no idea what that different was. And so a lot of my work initially was in sort of, calming them down a little bit and saying, actually, it's not that different than what you were doing, or maybe you were supposed to be doing previously. It's just in a different platform, right? So it's like, I like to use sports analogies a lot, but it's almost like, okay, so you've played tennis and you know how to play on a hard court. Now you got to play on clay. Sure, there's some differences, but you still got to be able to serve. You still got to be able to do a forehand. Like, some of the basic things are still good. So let's focus first on the fundamentals. And are you using just basic leadership hygiene, right? Are you connecting with your people? Are you making your direction clear? Are you setting expectations? Are you listening? So it still goes back to the basic fundamentals, and being able to remind them of that was critically important. Now, what changed was the frequency at which they might have had to do it, and the consistency at which they might have had to do it. Those were really the two variables that I saw change. But the fundamentals in and of themselves were not any different. And to be honest, if anything, it highlighted for many of them that maybe they weren't using them beforehand. And it enhanced the importance of it. So that was a big piece around helping them through this transition and how they do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you very much, Muriel Wilkins. We're talking about getting unstuck as a leader, and this is Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. Please feel free to type into the comment box. Let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, and questions that you have for Muriel Wilkins. We want to say hi to Maria, who's tuning in and joining us. And if you are enjoying this conversation, make sure to check out Muriel's work at murielwilkins.com. Her podcast is called called Coaching Real Leaders. And you can sign up to make sure you never miss a weekly episode by subscribing to my LinkedIn newsletter, where you get weekly reminders at dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. Now, Muriel, another question that I'm curious about. I love the phrase "own the room." I mean, it certainly is something that people have talked about forever, and you captured it as the title of your book. But I'm curious if you can talk just a little bit more about that specifically. When we say own the room, a piece of it, of course, is your voice as a leader, which you were addressing earlier. But what does that mean for people? And if you could give people just even one piece of advice about what it looks like to own the room, or how people can step up and do that more effectively, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, Dorie, here's the thing. Like, you are a multi-book author. Congratulations. And so that the title has to resonate and to be catchy, right? And so own the room is something that a lot of people resonate with because it's aspirational. Who doesn't want to own the room, right? And so I would say that when we thought about it, there's this external piece around when you walk into a room, do you actually lift the energy of the room, whichever room it is, right? It could be the boardroom, it could be the room where you're about to give some performance review feedback to one-on-one with an individual. It could be a stage. You define the room. But the question is, are you uplifting the energy? Are you contributing to the energy in that room, or are you draining from it? And the more you can contribute to it in whatever way that looks like, the more you are actually owning the room. So that's the external piece. But if you really dig deep, for those who really want to do the work, and this was probably our, internal sort of mission-driven piece that we wanted to get to, is own the room is not just an external endeavor. It's really also about, are you owning your room? So are you in control of what you're doing? Are you owning your stuff, your attributes, your assets, your liabilities, your thoughts? Are you owning your communications? Are you owning your physical behaviors? And at the end of the day, our focus is what is within your control. And really the only thing that's in your control is you. So we talk about own the room from an external expression and the impact you have others, but ultimately it's really about owning your own room. And I hope that makes sense in terms of the way that I articulated it.
I love it. We all want to own our own rooms.
That's right.
That's fantastic.
And and so when I talk to clients, everybody's like, I want to do this to this person, and that, and I want to change them. And it always comes back to, okay, but let's look at you. Right? Let's look at you and what we can do about you. And if we can do something about you, then hopefully the way that it, expresses itself out in the world and impacts others will be aligned, and will have some congruency with the intentions that you actually have.
I love it. That's fantastic, Muriel. And it looks like our comment feed is back working again. So we want to say hi to Anna, who's tuning in, David from Indianapolis, Yasmina from Paris, Kristen from Dallas, Harsha from London, Gail from North Carolina, Stacy from St. Petersburg. Oh my goodness. And on and on. We have Nicole in New Jersey. So many friends here. Thank you for tuning in and joining us. We're here with Muriel Wilkins, author and podcaster, and you can ask her your questions. And Anna had one, Muriel, for you, that she was curious, and certainly this is something we've all grappled with. We would love the perspective of a seasoned executive coach. If you could talk about how you recover from failure. What are your thoughts about that perennial important question?
Yeah. So thank you, Anna, for that question. Failure is such a loaded word, right? Because we are taught in most places, not every place, and thank God for the parents who don't teach their kids this, but we are taught that failure is a bad thing. So in a sense, I feel like what we're dealing with is kind of a, global epidemic conditioning that failure equals bad, right? And so every time we experience failure, when we think in this way, and a lot of times unconsciously, it automatically sends us reminders that we're not worthy, we're not good enough, that we need to do better. And that might then inspire a different type of response. So how do you recover from that? I think in the short term, the way you recover from failure, quite frankly, is you try again. And you try again, learning from the episode that happened in the past. So I'll never forget, I'll share with you a personal story. I got into a car accident when I think I was like 20 or 21. And it was the night before I was supposed to go back to college. My mother had told me not to go out. But no, I went out with my friends and we were coming back home at 3:00 in the morning on West Side Highway, for those of you who are familiar with New York. And I got into a pretty bad car accident. Totally my fault, by the way. All blame on me. And I remember coming home like in trepidation, right? My friends like fled the car because they didn't want to get in trouble. I got in. My mother, was not happy with me. My dad was out of town at the time. I went to bed, and at about later that morning, my father called and he said, "What happened?" I said, "I got into a car accident, Dad. It wasn't good. Mom is mad." And he said, "Okay, the first thing I want you to do when you get up is I want you to get into," I couldn't drive my car. He was like, "I want you to get into your mom's car and drive." And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, "Because if you don't do it, you're going to be afraid for a very, very long time around your capability to drive, and you have to know how to drive." Okay. I got to tell you, it was the best thing he could have ever done for me because he was right. And so I share that story because a lot of times the response for failure is to put yourself back into a situation that is close to what you already experienced, but learn from what you did. Right? It's the lessons learned in failure that are our biggest muscles to build. So I'm not saying, go out with the intent of failing all the time, but failing is inevitable. You're going to run into challenges, learn from them, and then repeat. That's what we do. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. It's inevitable, right? It's all a matter, though, of how you respond to it rather than how you recover for it. I don't think there's really a recovery. I think it's a response that's actually going to help you in the future.
Such a good point. Muriel Wilkins, thank you. And Elaine makes a great point. She says it's also about defining what is a failure situation in the first place. So perspective is really crucial there.
Exactly. Which is why you see me use the air quotes, right? In terms of failure.
Definitely. We love that. And we want to say hi to Mary from Kokomo. Cheryl is here from St. Paul. Joy from Delaware. Maria from Stockholm. This is terrific. We have a LinkedIn user joining us from Boca Raton. So all around the world, folks are tuning in. If you would like to ask questions to Muriel Wilkins, co-author of Own the Room and host of the podcast Coaching Real Leaders, feel free to type it in. We'd love to hear your questions. And in the interim, Muriel, I am curious. One of the things that we're hearing about a lot now that people are returning to the workforce post-COVID is just that really the past year has been an inflection point for a lot of people thinking about what's important to them, what they want in a job, what they want in their life. A lot of people are thinking about making perhaps some big changes. What do you see on the horizon and with your coaching clients? Do you feel like this is a moment of change? And if so, what is it that people can do in order to harness that moment of change effectively?
So is this a moment of change? Let's start with that. I think it is. However, one of the things that I remind my clients of is change is happening all the time, whether you like it or not. The difference right now is that there's sort of a collective magnifying glass on it because we're all, it's been elevated, right? It's like that, that little splinter that you had that you're like, you feel something, it's scratching, it's itchy a little bit, but then all of a sudden it's like it really rears its head and now you can really feel it. And I think because of the time that we've had, the extenuating circumstances that we've had, this feeling of change, and then it being collective has risen to the top. So yes, it's a moment, but I would say it's a moment that is more awakened than others. Okay. People are more aware of it. So what do you do with it? I definitely have seen people be a lot more introspective in both on a personal level and a professional level in terms of what this means for them. And I think, what do? You try to figure out what the choices are that lay ahead of you, right? A lot of times why people don't proactively move through change is because they haven't really thought through what their options are. What are the trade-offs that they're looking to make? And if they can figure out what those are, then they can actually move towards making decisions. So whether it be around, is this the right time for me to take a different job? Is this the right time for me to scale back? Is this the right time for me to move? I mean, I have one client who literally just decided she was going to move to a completely different geographic area, and said, I'm working remotely anyway, so why not? And it's, changed her life for the better. So trying to take stock of what are the areas in your life, professionally, personally, where it's time for you to evolve and move forward, and then what are the options in front of you. And by the way, same goes for if you're leading an organization, taking stock of what's working, what's not working with this organization, and what are the choices strategically, organizationally that you can make, so that you can take the time to do them as you move forward. So it's a great opportunity to be proactive rather than reactive, which is where a lot of us get stuck.
So true. Muriel Wilkins, thank you very much. We have a question from Lisa in Atlanta, our fellow author, Lisa Earl McLeod. She's curious and would love your thoughts about how do you own the room when you've got competing agendas or people are disagreeing with you? As Lisa said, being aggressive doesn't seem to work. But so what's a powerful yet respectful way to own the room? How do you straddle that, Muriel?
Yeah. So yes, being aggressive doesn't work. It'll come back to bite you. And I always say there's a thin line between being aggressive and being assertive. So you can be assertive without being aggressive. And what's the difference between the two? 9 times out of 10, it comes down to your delivery. Okay. So as I mentioned before, the ability for you to own the room really is based on 2 muscles that you have to build, or 2 pieces of impact. You have to have credibility and you have to have connectivity and relatability. So when there are competing agendas, okay, where most people go wrong is they completely focus on their credibility and their voice, right? Let me get my point across. Let me get my agenda across. And it's push, 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 push. And in the way of doing that, they have completely left everybody else out of the room. When you leave everybody else out of the room, you are not owning the room. You're there by yourself, even if they're physically there. So when you have competing agendas, the place to start is understand what their context is, understand what their reality is, understand what point of view they're coming from. And because you understand it, and you have to hear me very clearly in this, understanding something doesn't mean that you agree with it, okay? But if you can demonstrate that you understand it and then frame your message in the context of their understanding, you have a way better chance of getting closer to alignment. So owning the room when there are differing points of views is you holding the position where you can hold both agendas and they're an and, rather than just holding on tightly to your agenda and in the process of doing that, really excluding their agenda and them from the room from the get-go, which will get you nowhere.
That makes a lot of sense. Muriel Wilkins, thank you. If you want to learn more about Muriel Wilkins, the co-author of the book Own the Room and the host of the Coaching Real Leaders podcast, go to her website. It is murielwilkins.com. And if you want to sign up for my mailing list and make sure you never miss one of these weekly episodes for Newsweek, you can go to dorieclark.com and sign up for the newsletter and receive a free self-assessment. And if you're enjoying this conversation, please feel free to hit the like button and the share button so that your colleagues can benefit from it as well. Now, Muriel, one of the things that I was curious about before we went on live, you were telling me something that I will say is perhaps downright aspirational for many professionals, which is that you are taking the entire month of August off. Can you tell us about this? You've been doing it a number of years. How inquiring minds want to know, how do you make this possible? What are the steps that are necessary so that a professional who might be inspired by you can also learn to take a month off in their schedule?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I didn't know you were going to out me like that, Dorie. So just so everybody out there knows, you can totally tell this is unscripted. So how do you do it? So first of all, I mean, I have to I run my own business, right? So I have a firm. We're 25 people. I'm one of the partners there. And I had an epiphany. So I have a bit more flexibility. But that said, I will say for a very, very long time, I've been in business for myself now for close to 17 years. And I only started doing this about 7, 8 years ago. And I will tell you, for a very, very long time, I was working nonstop all the time, all the time, all the time. And I had reached a point in my, career as an entrepreneur where I was questioning, do I still want to do this? Why am I doing this? And one of the things that my business partner and I had always said is the business works for us, not the other way around. And in that moment, again, this like 7, 8 years ago, when I had this thought, I said, am I truly leveraging the aspect of the business in the way that it's going to work for me now? So I was at a very different place in time than where I had been when I first started it. And what I realized was that one of the things I was not taking advantage of was the flexibility that owning my own business could afford me, particularly where, at that point we had gotten to a pretty stable place. I wasn't, questioning whether I could pay the mortgage and all of that. But I wasn't leveraging it. So it's no different than if you are running an organization and you realize you're not leveraging your best people, you're not leveraging your best assets. So one of the assets that I had, which was flexibility, I was not leveraging. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I am very much a type A person in constant self-management. So I always know that left unhinged, I will just, work all the time. And so I've self-managed this for a long time. And so what I did is I started off by taking 2 weeks. And then I said, I could actually do this. And it was 2 weeks off the grid, right? Didn't take my cell phone, didn't check email. It was hard. And then I extended it to 3 weeks, and then slowly it became 4 weeks. And before I know it, my assistant is like, hold up, I'm looking at your calendar and it says August 1 to post Labor Day in perpetuity. I literally just put it on repeat till the end of days. And that's what I do. And I set expectations. I tell all of my clients ahead of time. I tell all of my people. I put some boundaries, and I make sure my promise to my colleagues is the business and you will not suffer as a result. And if you do, then we need to recalibrate. And if you don't, then it just shows that it's possible. So I put a lot of checks and balances around it. And for now, it works. And if it ever doesn't, then I'll have to re-question it. But it's one of the best things I can do for myself and for my clients, because I come back supercharged. They hate it when I come back in September, because I'm like laser focused, and they're like, okay, please don't take another month off. Don't do it. But that's what I do. And I love it. It's a great time for me.
Well, you're getting a lot of cheers in the comments, Muriel. Cheryl says, what a rock star way to invest in yourself. And Yasmina from Paris has given you the ultimate nod. She says, you're very European, Muriel.
So I have to be honest. So, here's the thing, Yasmina. So growing up, my father worked for an organization where they had annual leave every August. And so this definitely was this like almost a childhood habit that I wanted to go back to. And it's just a testament that sometimes, the memory never fails. Like it's a muscle built in your body. And that's exactly where it came from, in terms of that notion of, being able to take extended period of downtime, even if like last year in the midst of COVID, that August was spent in my little postage stamp garden in the backyard. Like literally, I was like, vacation can be anywhere.
So true. We are almost out of time, but we have time for perhaps one more quick question. Muriel, an important one came in from one of our friends on LinkedIn. They want to know, Muriel, what would you say is the right time for a career coach? How can you discern if you're stuck in your career development and maybe need a coach to get to the next level? What would you say to a person in that situation?
I mean, look, I don't think it's any different around when is the right time to get a personal trainer, right? I'm like very, I can do it all by myself, et cetera. until I reach a point, and I reached it with personal training. This is how I got into this line of work when I hired an executive coach about 20 years ago. And it was a point where I realized I was trying things in the words of Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. I kept trying things in the way that I had done them, and it wasn't necessarily getting me to goal. So that was one. Secondly, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so when you realize that there might be alternative strategies and alternative paths for you to learn to get you to your goal, but you don't know what those are, a good coach will be a good sounding board and will help you frame what choices you have in front of you to help you get to the answer. So this feeling of really being stuck, whether it's a little stuck, which is, I don't know how to deal with this situation, which is how a lot of my, I deal a lot with CEOs. That's the questions they have, or it's big stuck, which is, I have no idea what I want to do next in my life, right? The big questions. It really is somebody to help keep that momentum moving forward in a way that is aligned with what your goals are. And if you're looking for a leadership coach, that's also aligned with the type of leader that your organization needs in order for it to be effective.
Powerful advice. Muriel Wilkins, thank you for being here. We've been talking about how to get unstuck as a leader. If you want to learn more about Muriel and her work, go to murielwilkins.com. If you want to make sure you never miss a weekly episode of our Newsweek show, better subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter at dorieclark.com/LinkedIn. Just hit the subscribe button. We're so pleased for everyone who turned in. Thank you for your great questions. And Muriel, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Truly a great time to spend with you.